Good evening, salam, welcome to everyone joining us today. My name is Luna Banuri. I'm the Executive Director for Utah Muslim Civic League. Civic League's goal is to enhance Muslim participation in the civic process and to strengthen the democracy of this country. Today, we're joined with two panelists from ACLU to talk about the rights and different factors that come into play when you participate in a protest. I'm also joined by my brilliant team at UMCL. I'm going to go ahead and ask each one of them from the UMCL team to introduce themselves and then begin the conversations with the ACLU panelists. Shema, would you like to begin, please?
Yeah, hi, my name is Shema and I am the Civic Engagement Fellow with UMCL.
I'm hoping the team would introduce themselves instead of me calling on them. So keep going.
Hi, I'm Abed, and I'm the UMCL Community Organizing Fellow.
Hi, my name is Abdi Kadir, and I am the UMCL Fellow who manages the Business Specialist Development.
Hello, my name is Khadija, and I'm the Racial Justice Fellow at the Utah Muslim Civic League.
Thank you, Emily. Go ahead, sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say I'm Emily and I work on the social media part of it.
Thank you, Emily. I didn't see you, I'm sorry. I was going to introduce you myself, but I see you now online. Nikki, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi, my name is Nikila Venugopal, and I am the Voting Rights Coordinator at the ACLU of Utah. So excited and honored to be here today with this incredible team at UMCL. Also super happy to be here with my colleague, Sydney. If Sydney, you want to introduce yourself too.
Hi there, my name is Sydni Makemo. I am it's a really long title. It's the Southern Utah Community Outreach Coordinator. And like Nikki was saying earlier, for those of you that were here, that means I do the ACLU stuff for Southern Utah. I do all the things, that's my job. Yeah, so I'm really grateful that you invited me here. So I'm really looking forward to this.
So I'm sure your title sort of corresponds with the distance you have to travel as well. Long and,
Yeah.
Welcome to both of you. I'm going to ask my fellows to start the question and answer and the dialogue with you. I know that we all want to know and understand what ACLU does in the community and a recap of how, as protesters, our right come into play when we're out on the street. If any of the fellows want to start the discussion, please go ahead.
I think, Nikki, if you want to start sharing your screen, we could do the training first and then go into Q&A.
Great. So I will share my screen here in just a sec. And before I do, I'll just say that the ACLU of Utah is a nonpartisan nonprofit. And for those of you who don't know what we do, we basically deal with civil rights and civil liberties using a couple different methods. We do public education and outreach, litigation, and legislative advocacy on the state and, working on the local level for public advocacy as well to basically progress, protect, and expand civil rights and liberties. So with that being said, some of the most pertinent rights to know right now are your rights as protesters and your rights when interacting with law enforcement. So let's just jump right in and I will start sharing my screen. All right, can everybody see that okay?
Yes.
Great. So yeah, I'm going to go through this and my colleague Sydney is going to jump in. So I've done a lot of legal observing at protests myself. And Sydney has done a lot of organizing protests, interacting during protests, being there on the ground. So she'll be able to speak a lot to personal experience. So here we go. Know your rights when protesting and or any other time you are interacting with law enforcement. It is important to know your rights. So first of all, it's important to note that every person has a constitutional right to engage in peaceful protest. There are no limitations to the First Amendment right based on race, gender, nationality, citizenship status, or religion. So, and that being said, that means that you have the right to protest in public forums such as streets, sidewalks, or parks. However, it is important to note that under Utah law, you cannot picket a private person's residence. The one weird exception to that in Utah is that you may picket outside the governor's mansion, because that is, on the sidewalk outside of that, that is state property. You cannot block entry into government buildings. I will also stop and say we'll do some question and answers at the end. So remember your questions as you're going and ask them. So the government is allowed to regulate sort of the time and manner in which you can protest, but they are not allowed to unreasonably restrict your rights. So they can't put regulations that basically make it so that you cannot protest in a public space, such as a street, a sidewalk, or a park. So free speech is more than just words. It includes clothing, music, conduct that expresses yourself. Under Utah law specifically, it does not include defamation, words to encourage a violent reaction or committing a crime, obscenity, which is kind of a squishy term, or targeting a specific person's home. It also does not include damage to property or people. So police have the right to intervene in a protest only in certain situations. However, if police issue orders during a protest, it is important that you calmly follow them. You can be arrested for disturbing the peace if you fail to follow police orders. And this is one theme that's going to be in the protest, is that you can't really litigate these issues in the street while you're protesting. So you might be right in that the police might be doing something that they're not allowed to do. They might be infringing on your rights. But you need to know that if you're pushing back really hard, if you're not following orders, you still might end up being arrested, which still might have consequences for you. So we say, don't try to litigate it in the street, calmly follow orders, and then call the ACLU, call one of the resources at hand to sue, to handle it on the back end.
I'm going to add something to this as well, Nikki. So not only is it important to follow their orders, even if it is a violation of your rights, the thing that they're asking you to do, you're like, but this is my right. I can do this thing. Once you start to kind of elevate the mood and you're arguing back, not only does it put you at risk of being arrested or being charged with with disturbing the peace, but it puts you in physical danger. And one of the things that we do with these trainings, and it's not just to prevent you from catching a charge, but I just want you to go home safely. That's my goal. Like, I want you to go home safely and then come to us later. And like Nikki is saying, tell us what's going on, as opposed to kind of getting in their face and say, I know my rights, but I know my rights. As much as that is your right, and that your rights may be getting violated in that moment, I just want you to please come home safely, so that we can deal with that, instead of you calling us from a jail cell or from the hospital and saying, yo, this happened to me. So even though it's not your job to actually keep things calm there, because I want you to be okay, I'm going to ask you to try and practice that. Practice knowing what your rights are, but also calmly following through with those, so that you can come to me the next day and tell me what happened. So.
Thanks, Sydney. So let's move on to recording police at protest, because we have all seen, that is where we're getting footage of what's going on, how we're knowing what police are doing. You do have the right to record and take pictures during a protest, as long as it does not interfere with police activities. It doesn't, physically obstruct their movements, interfere with what they're doing. And here is one tip to keep in mind before you go to a protest: is disable the face and touch ID to unlock your phone before a protest. That way, for example, law enforcement couldn't hold up your phone to your face and unlock it without your consent, without a warrant. Now, they're not supposed to be doing that anyways. So if that happens, if, for example, if the police try to force you to unlock your phone, delete or turn over any photos, videos, recordings on your phone without a warrant signed by a judge, they shouldn't be doing that, and we want to know, because that's an issue that we would prioritize. So again, the police cannot force you to unlock your phone, but it is best practice to disable that face and touch ID So just password protected only on your phone before you go. But you do have the right to record and take pictures. So again, this is not even just specific to protests, but anytime you think you might be witnessing police abuse or brutality, recording, if possible, is a great way to ensure that folks like groups like the ACLU, like other watchdog groups out there, can try to handle some of these issues that are happening. So stand at a safe distance, and if possible, use your phone to record a video of what's happening. We recommend that you don't try to hide the fact that you are recording. Police officers themselves do not have a reasonable expectation of privacy when performing their jobs. That means that you are allowed to record them while they're doing their job. There's nothing wrong with that. However, the people they're interacting with may have privacy rights that would require you to notify them of the recording. So making it really clear that you're recording is a best practice. So if you are arrested at a protest, and you'll see my disclaimer at the top, this applies whether you get arrested at a protest or anywhere else. Stay calm, do not argue, complain, run, touch, or push an officer. It might sound a little outlandish, but there can be criminal consequences even for just touching an officer, touching their shield. So, try to stay calm. It can be, I know that's a really hard thing to do, and it shouldn't be your job to have to maintain that situation. It should be on law enforcement to keep things calm and de-escalate. But it is best practice to try to stay calm, and remembering that anything you say during an arrest can be used against you. So with that being said, if you are arrested, here are the things you want to do. 1, ask for an attorney. 2, state that you want to remain silent. And 3, please actually remain silent. So, a lot of times if you watch videos of people getting arrested at protests, you'll see them say, they'll enact their right to remain silent and say, I'm going to remain silent. I'm not going to talk to you without a lawyer. But then they'll keep talking. So you don't want to give law enforcement anything at all that could be used against you later. It's important to remember that officers aren't there to use any information that you give them to exonerate you. They're there to use any information that you give them to convict you. So again, if there's anything you take away from this presentation, this is maybe the biggest side to remember. You're going to verbally say that you want an attorney, and then you're going to say that you want to remain silent, that you're using your right to remain silent, and then you're going to not talk anymore after that.
See, and it's important that you state that you want to remain silent, because if you don't, it can be perceived that you're just being uncooperative and not actually exercising your rights. So it's important to say that I'm exercising my right to stay silent. And then, like she's saying, for goodness sakes, please just stay silent, please.
Yeah, definitely. So that's maybe before you go to a protest, it might be good to sort of like practice what is that statement that you're going to say. I want an attorney. I'm exercising my right to an attorney, and I'm exercising my right to remain silent. So like have the actual sentence that you would say in your head, and maybe say it to yourself a couple of times, because in the moment things are heated, it's scary. You want to have practice, and you want to have exactly what you're going to say so that and there's you don't have any confusion. If you are taken to jail, if you are a citizen of another country, you have the right to call your consulate. You also have the right to make a local phone call, no matter who you are. So, and one thing to remember is if this phone call is to an attorney, police can't listen. If you call somebody who's not an attorney, police are likely to listen. So keep that in mind. If your local phone call is to an attorney, they can't listen at all. If your phone call is to somebody who's not an attorney, they're probably going to listen to your call. So that's something to remember. I also want to note that when you're in your 3 steps here, asking for an attorney, remaining silent, and then staying silent, when you ask for an attorney, you don't have to have an attorney in your mind that you're thinking of. Like many of us who are probably going to protest probably don't have an attorney out there somewhere on retainer. That's okay. You don't have to say, I want an attorney, and this is the specific attorney, and here's their contact information, right? You can just ask for an attorney that the state can provide.
Also, one thing to add on to that, sorry, Nikki, to keep jumping in, but
no, this is great.
It is, like we said, so ask an attorney, stay silent. But one of the things you do absolutely have to give them is your name. So if they ask you for your name, you do have to give it. If they ask you for your name and your address, that's something you do have to give. Other than that, give them absolutely nothing. Absolutely nothing. Even if you've done nothing wrong, for the love of goodness, give them absolutely nothing. And just like Nikki has said, it's important to practice these statements over and over and over. I practice them. I have my kids practice them. My children that like, they're not doing anything wrong. They're children, but it is important to practice these statements because in the heat of the moment, you're stressed, you're scared. I was literally out talking to my neighbor, coaching him during an incident that happened a few weeks ago, and he was doing so well until he wasn't. And it's because he hadn't practiced the statements and he got scared. So.
Totally. Thanks. So, and this is going to move us into sort of what Sydney's talking about. These are rights that you need to know all the time, not just at protests. And these rules apply, or these rights apply, anytime you're interacting with law enforcement. So, for example, an officer might stop you on the street and start asking questions. So, like Sydney said, you do have to provide your name and address if the officer has reasonable suspicion. So this is suspicion based on specific articulable facts drawn from all of the circumstances facing the officer when they stop you. So again, name and address, and then you say that you want to remain silent, and then you stop talking. So here's some more sort of like clarifying questions if you're not sure whether you're being sort of officially detained by an officer or not. And this can be where things get a little bit mushy and where we might mess up. So am I suspected of a crime? If an officer's stopping you and they're just kind of being friendly, they just kind of want to talk, they're maybe asking you some questions, this might be where you trip up and think it's okay to just share some information, to just keep talking a little bit. But actually what you want to do is you want to clarify what is going on and then, stop talking. So am I suspected of a crime? If no, then you do not have to provide any information at all. If you are suspected of a crime, you have to provide that identifying information. So the name and the address. Am I being detained? Did they just stop you for a casual friendly chat on the street corner, or are they actually officially detaining you? So if they say, no, you're not being detained, then you ask, am I free to leave? If they say yes, then you leave. If they say no, then that's when you say, I have a right to remain silent. And that's when you stop talking. Am I being charged with a crime? That's kind of how you can figure out, are you actually being detained, or can you leave that situation? The goal here is for you to be able to freely leave that situation or stop talking as soon as possible. So again, these are clarifying questions to determine whether an officer is commanding you or asking you. For example, get out of the car. Are you asking me to get out of the car? Do I have an option? Am I free to leave? Or am I being detained and I need to get out of the car? That's kind of an example. I'll leave this slide up if anybody out there is wanting to screenshot it or anything for a second. Okay, 3, 2, 1. So if an officer stops you to do something called a Terry stop or stop and frisk, so this allows an officer to stop you and do a pat down or frisk to look for weapons, but they need reasonable suspicion of a crime and of a weapon in order to do this. And an officer can remove contraband that is immediately important or immediately apparent. Not immediately important, immediately apparent. So here we move on to if an officer pulls you over in a car. So again, an officer needs that reasonable suspicion, that specific articulable facts to pull you over. And you are in fact detained when an officer pulls you over. So that means that you do have to comply with officer requests for identification, for your registration, and for your insurance. Pull your car over safely, turn on the lights, roll down the window, and announce that you are pulling those items out. And I will note here too that driver's privilege cards are available to everybody, not, regardless of immigration status. So in this situation, both the driver and the passengers have a right to remain silent. You do not have to answer any questions about your immigration status. And again, this goes back to the theme of your name and address and no other information. If you do get cited, you can ask then if you're free to leave. The police cannot extend a traffic stop longer than it takes to sort out the reason for the stop. So again, your goal is to be told that you can freely leave the situation, or told that you can't, and in that case, you know that you need to remain silent. There's an exception to police extending the stop, and that is police can have a drug dog sniff around your car even if you're only pulled over for reasonable suspicion of a traffic violation.
With that, I'm going to add something here. So, and I don't know if you're going to get to this in the slides, but the police can have a dog come to sniff your car. So if they ask you if they can search your car, what's the answer, everybody? The answer is always no. Always. Can I search your car? No. Do you have a warrant? The answer is no. The answer is always no. Can I search anything? ABC. The answer is always going to be no unless they have a warrant. That includes your vehicle. Now, what might happen sometimes is if you get pulled over and they say, hey, can I please search your car? I smell ABC. The answer, once again, is always no. A threat that will typically be thrown out is a threat. Oh, look at, she's got it. Okay. The threat that may be brought out is, well, we'll just bring the dogs. And the answer at that point is okay. So you may have to sit there longer. You come, you let them bring those dogs. But the answer is always no to a warrant unless they have a warrant. Never to a search unless they have a warrant. And I guess she'll get to that. Sorry, Nikki.
No, Sydney's thinking ahead.
So I have a quick question. What if there's probable cause, they see the object in your car and they want to, does that give them reason to go into your car?
Yep. So right here, you are never going to consent to a search. Is sort of the first thing. No matter what, if they're going to ask for consent to search, and you're going to say no, no matter what. However, an officer with or without your consent can lawfully search during an arrest. If an officer has probable cause, again, like you mentioned, during a traffic stop, if your car is impounded, or if the officer has a warrant for that search. Now, again, you can always say no, and we're going to say always say no when asking for your consent to search.
And also let nothing ever be within eyesight. I mean, not that you should have anything, but definitely not in eyesight or where you can see it.
I will also say Sydney and I are not legal or not attorneys, and this is not legal advice. There's our disclaimer on that. Okay. So let's move on to the police are at my door. So number one, door closed. This goes back to the idea, again, of you are not going to consent to invite law enforcement to search your house, your person, ever. You're going to say, no, you do not consent. And one of the ways that you need to do that is you need to keep the door closed. So you're going to talk through the door if there are law enforcement officers at your house. Cracking that door open even a tiny bit can be construed as consent for them to enter your home, to come in, to search, to do whatever. So do not invite the officers into your house, no matter how friendly they're being. Talk through the door. Number two, you're going to check the warrant. So you're going to ask the officer to slip the warrant under the door or hold it up to a window so that you can read it and see that it is actually signed by a judge, that it's the right address, that all the information looks accurate. So if the door is closed, you're asking them to slip the warrant under the door or hold it up to the window so you can check it out. So even if the officers have a warrant, you still, again, have the right to remain silent, and you're going to say that out loud and you're going to enact it. You're going to say, I have the right to remain silent and I'm exercising that right. And then once again, you are going to stop talking at that point.
Sorry, I have a question. So the warrant would have a judge's signature, right? Not just their, it would have their their stamp, right?
Yeah, so a warrant is going to be, you want that warrant to actually be signed by a judge. So you're going to look for a judge's signature on that warrant. So make sure when they're holding it up, it's not just a random piece of paper. It's got to have that right address on it, and it's got to have the judge's signature. So now we're going to move on to tips to consider. And after that, we can move on to just regular questions about any of this stuff. So first of all, like we said before you go to a protest, you're going to disable Face and Touch ID to unlock your phone. Once again, police don't have the right to confiscate your phone, to delete, to make you hand over photos, videos, anything without a warrant. If they're doing that at a protest or when they're detaining you, then please let us know. We will take that issue up. But it is just best practice to disable everything except for actually like old-fashioned punching in the numbers to unlock your phone. Here's another one. So use a Sharpie to write an emergency contact number on your arm. And that person, it's best practice, for that person to have your name and your birth date. And consider writing the National Lawyer Guild's hotline on your arm as well. They have a jail support hotline. And we'll put that up at the end of this for everybody to note down. Again, you don't have to have an attorney in your head. You don't have to have an attorney that you've paid for on a retainer to have the right to an attorney and to enact that. So this jail hotline number, having an emergency contact, a friend or family know where you are, having their number written down on your arm or memorized is really important. Again, bring water, a snack, a mask, please. And bring any of your necessary prescriptions in their original labels or bottles. That way, if you do get arrested, if you've got those prescriptions in their original labels and bottles and it's medically necessary for you to take them, you should be allowed to take them. So have those with you. The buddy system at a protest, again, this isn't necessarily linking arms like a buddy, because stay 6 feet away from everyone, please. But have somebody at the protest that's looking out for you, that knows where you are, and stay with the group. This is really important. Don't wander off on your own. Again, this isn't legal advice. This is just from personal experience, best practices. Stay with the group. Have somebody who knows who you are, be looking out for each other. Again, before you go to a protest, know that protest organizers may have many different strategies that they're planning to enact. They might have a very specific plan for that protest, including civil disobedience. There is often a jail support team. A lot of groups in Salt Lake and in Utah, community groups that have risen up that are organizing and protesting in the street, are very organized. They have specific teams for specific things. Have a plan for yourself in terms of what are you comfortable with. Kind of know what you're walking into before you go. And that's just something to consider. A protest that seems really, chaotic, that you might not understand. Oftentimes protest organizers have specifically planned what's going to happen. That being said, knowing the risks, you never know exactly how a protest is going to end up. And you need to weigh that before you go. If you're organizing a protest, consider contacting the National Lawyers Guild to send legal observers. That's going to be a really handy tool. So legal observers can be there to basically be that role to film and be that watchdog over law enforcement. You might have seen legal observers from the National Lawyers Guild in their bright green yellow hats out at protests, and they are a great resource. Again, don't try to litigate in the street. Oftentimes it hasn't worked that people have been able to talk their way out of getting arrested. But, we prefer that you, if police are giving orders, that you try to calmly follow them. And then, if police are violating rights, then we will handle that. Another group can handle that. So this is another just tip. Record law enforcement, not fellow protesters. Try not to capture protesters' faces in what you post online, social media. Be really aware of that. We want to be looking out for our community and and aiming our camera at law enforcement when it comes to violation of rights. Also, another thing to watch out for that can often happen is kettling tactics. So police might give you, for example, might give an order to disperse at a protest. And that's where we advise you to listen to that order. But at the same time, we're seeing some of these troubling kettling tactics where police might give you an order to disperse, but kettling is where they sort of block off your exits and your way to leave. Now, if that's happening, again, we want you to report that to us. That's an issue that we're taking up. But just, again, knowing the risks of going into protests, that is something that we've seen happen. So you can end up in these situations where police are ordering people to disperse, but in reality, they're blocking people off. So sort of staying engaged, watching what's happening, watching where the protesters are headed, where law enforcement is headed, where you are physically and geographically, staying watchful of that can be important. So then after a protest, arrest, or really anytime you think you are witnessing police brutality, you're going to want to write down everything you remember, including officers' badge numbers and patrol car numbers, what agencies were the officers from, were they SLCPD, were they Unified Police, was it some other agency, how many officers were present and what their names were, if you were able to get their names, any use of weapons, including less lethal weapons such as tasers or batons, and any injuries that you saw people suffer when they were detained or interacting with police. So that, again, that's something that's important to do as soon as you possibly can before those details leave your mind. Write it down. That way, if you or the person who was impacted need to file a complaint with a certain department, need to file a complaint with us, need to have their rights protected afterwards, that they've got that information, that you've got that information ready to protect yourself with.
With that said, we talked about writing on your body with the phone numbers with the Sharpie. I just keep a Sharpie in my back pocket. And as things are happening, if I see something, then I just take what I'm seeing and I write it down. So just because it is really important to get as much as you can and retain that information. And also on the idea of kettling that she was talking about, it's really important to have an eye at every moment that this is going on, to look for an exit strategy. Always keep an eye out for the way for you to get out of there immediately and safely. If there are people there that you're responsible for, maybe your buddy or a group of people that came with you, be mindful of those that are in your sphere of influence, those people that are relying on you, and be mindful of how to get you and those people away immediately. So if you're marching, and always know the exits as that's changing through a march. If you're standing in a place in a protest, as you're walking up to this protest, as you're driving up to it, keep an eye of how you can get out, and be mindful as that might change as different avenues are being blocked off. But being alert to your surroundings is going to be super important.
Great. And so these are some resources that I think are really important to note. Again, if you're watching this might be a good page to take a quick screenshot of. I know that you can find both of these organizations' websites, and you can find them on social media. So the National Lawyers Guild are the ones who you can contact if you're organizing a protest and you'd like legal observers there. They also have this jail support hotline. I've seen a lot of people on the ground encouraging protesters to, again, Sharpie this number on your arm before you head to a protest. This is also the email address that you can use to contact them. And then Utah Against Police Brutality is another great community organization out there that has been coordinating jail support and bail fund support as well. So get in contact with them if you want to talk more about those things. And then, so contacting the ACLU of Utah and submitting a civil rights complaint. So if you do think you're witnessing police brutality out there, your rights have been violated, somebody you know, their rights have been violated at a protest or anywhere else when interacting with law enforcement, please let us know. You can shoot us an email, a call. You can go to our website and submit a complaint right online. You can also find us on Facebook and Instagram. And I realized I should have put my email up here. So you can get in touch with, if you're on UMCL's social media, I'm sure they can put you in touch with me as well. But yeah, we're here. We want to see, you know, what's happening out there. If your rights are being violated, if you're seeing those kettling tactics, if police are trying to get your, you know, get photos, videos off your phone without a warrant, anything like that, please let us know. With that said, Sydney, are there any other, as somebody who has been to a lot of protests recently, has been a protest organizer, are there any other sort of like best practices or tips that you wanted to highlight?
A couple of things. The idea, like we were talking about the your phones and protecting them so the officers don't have access to it. Just so you're aware, it happened recently here in Utah where a law enforcement officer actually deleted videos and photos off a phone. So like what these things we're saying, they really happen. So please be mindful of them. Also, when you are going to a protest, it is absolutely important that you not only be aware of yourself and where you are and how deep you really want to get into things. Remember, it's really important to decide beforehand, like, yes, I can be arrested. No, I cannot be arrested. I'm willing to go this far. And if once it starts to get to that point where you've set your limit, you predetermine that before you're in that emotional state, because anybody that knows when you get out to this protest or this rally or whatever that's going on, you can be caught up in the moment. So make the decision beforehand, decide what is reasonable for you and your safety. For instance, if you are dealing with immigration issues, if you are an immigrant in any fashion, you cannot afford to be arrested at all. That's the kind. So really be mindful, like in your situation and you have to reapply for a visa, it can have major impacts on you. And bless you for getting out there. And I'd love to see you participating in your First Amendment right and being a part of these movements. But it's important to know what you can do beforehand. And as you start to see it escalating in that way, remember what your exit strategy and take it. And there's no shame in that. There's nothing wrong with that. Don't feel guilty about that. Everybody can have their own form of activism in which they can participate to their own level. And that's what we need everybody to do is they each have a part to play in this. We talked about the writing stuff on your arm before you go in. It's also helpful to have not only a friend or a family member that knows that you're going where you're going to be, but for instance, Nikki and I have done this together where I might call her and say, hey, Nikki, you're my person. Your number's going to be on my arm. And I let her know I'm going to be there at 7:00. And then at the end, I text her, call her and say, hey, I got home safely. Thank you so much. Within that time, she knows to have her phone next to her the whole time. She will not miss my call because she knows that if I call, it's going to be that important. So have some, not only a buddy system there that's present with you, but somebody that is holding it down for you. A great person to rely on is somebody that's out of town that wants to help participate but can't. Somebody that's dealing with some kind of illness and can't leave home because of COVID and all that's going on. A lot of people are trying to find a way to engage. This is a perfect way that they can be a safety net for you as well. Let's see, we talked about listening to the officers, and I know it's unfair to ask you not to escalate the situation or beyond that, to ask you to de-escalate the situation. That is unfair, and it's not okay that we're going to ask you that, but I'm going to ask you that. I'm going to ask you to do your best to take control of the situation to the best of your ability and de-escalate it, because they may not. And I can deal with that later on. I'll deal with their behavior later on. My goal, and I said this before, is to get you home safely. When we're dealing with angry people that have weapons and they have more firepower than you, my greatest concern is just getting you home safely. Last but not least, for the love of goodness, listen to your organizers. Listen to them, 100%. 100%. They say disperse, you disperse. They say move left, you move left. They say move right, you move right. That's what you do. That's what you do. You don't think, but oh, no, I know what I'm doing. I'm going this way. Unless you're dipping out and making your exit, you listen to those organizers, and that's that. They are telling you what to do, and they're telling you for a reason. So you're going to listen to your organizers, and Oh, also remember what you're doing there. I know somebody might call you out. They might call you the N-word. They might put their hands on you, right? They might, the last protest I was at up in Salt Lake, this guy kept pushing me, and y'all don't know me, but the old Sydney knows exactly how to handle that. New Sydney had to calm down the old Sydney and say, not this place, not this time. Because if I would have done what I wanted to do, I could have had him down on the ground in a matter of seconds, and I wanted to. But I had to remind myself that's not my place. And by increasing that level of violence in that moment would have put a lot of other people at risk. And that is not okay. That is not okay for you to make that decision. And even though I know how hard it is, I know in that moment, it was really hard for me to do the right thing. But so this is another conversation to have with yourself before you go in. Understand, people might push you physically, verbally, and in other ways, but it's up to you to keep yourself and those that are there with you safe. And one of those things is not taking the bait and not escalating the situation whenever you have the power to do so. I think that's all I have to say on the things.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I think that really speaks to something that we always like to sort of bring this back to at the end, is that it's really important to know your rights. We want you to know your rights in order to exercise them. We want you to be able to say, I'm going to remain silent, I'm going to ask for an attorney, and then stop talking. However, with some of these just because you might be right and know your rights, really pushing back against officers, going to a protest is inherently risky, and there's a chance that you could get arrested. And we have to be conscious of the fact that racial inequities exist. That's why a lot of these protests are happening. So for us to, it might be really easy for somebody who is, for example, a white male attorney, when he gets pulled over in his car, for him to assert all of his rights and be really assertive. But we know that those racial inequities are very real and have different consequences based on who you are. So know your rights, but do what you need to do to feel comfortable to get yourself safely out of the situations, and submit civil rights complaints whenever you see your rights being violated. And with that, I think that is all I've got for my presentation, and we could move to question and answer, Shema, if we've got people submitting questions.
Yeah, we can answer. There's two right now in the Q&A. So the first one is, if I'm being pulled over and the officer wants me to get out of the car, do I have to get out?
So again, this is where is that a command, or is that a question? Are they, sort of, I guess, unofficially asking you to get out of the car, or are they demanding that you get out of the car? So if we can flip back to this slide here. So again, those clarifying questions to determine whether the officer is commanding you or asking you. And if it's a command, if you're being detained, then we're going to want you to follow those orders. If they say, oh no, I was just, they're sort of trying to trick you into that. If it's not sort of, they're officially detaining you and commanding you to do something, then you're going to ask, am I free to leave? But we are going to say, if they're commanding you to do something, we're going to advise that you follow those orders. And then again, that's where you say, I'm exercising my right to remain silent, and you don't say a word.
Great, thank you. And then another question we got, can you use the sidewalk in front of your own home for a smaller protest without getting a permit? And can you define picketing?
Yeah, let me flip back to at the beginning here. So I will say that I am not an attorney, so I cannot give you legal advice or sort of the legal definition of picketing. But so basically picketing is, basically you can't go protest outside of a private person's residence. For example, an elected official, you can't go to their home and stage a protest out on the sidewalk in front of it. You can't, again, the one exception is the governor's mansion, which is kind of a weird little caveat there. I mean, you can kind of, I think, you have every right to stand outside of your own home if that's, what you want to do on the sidewalk there. But, yeah, basically you can't go protest a specific person outside of their private residence. If that makes sense.
Just so you know, I saw this really cute little protest where these little girls were like out there doing a Black Lives Matter thing, and they had their signs, and it was stinking adorable. Oh, bless them. They're great. But ask yourself some questions. Like, if you're going to be doing this in front of your own home, how's your neighbors going to handle that? What's going to happen? How many people are going to come? And it's not that I really care about what your neighbors think, but I care for your safety and well-being. So let's say I were to do it here in front of my home, and I was to have 20 of my friends come over and we were to do it. If there is any kind of overflow into the other neighbor's yard, that I would be concerned that something may happen to me. I'm concerned that the police may be called, and if they may be nice, look at me and all my little white soccer mom thing going on. They may be nice to me, but understanding that it could go in the wrong way. And if I'm organizing a protest, it is my job to make sure that those that come stay safe. So I want to take all the steps to make sure that they stay safe. So I wouldn't recommend doing something in front of your home like that, because how it could get turned in some kind of way, maybe not towards you, but to those that you invite, maybe with you. Maybe that's a risk you're willing to take, but it's not a fair risk to ask them to take. And as far as the sidewalk chalk, I don't know if Nikki, if you were going to get back on that, but we've seen some with sidewalk, and I thought it was a great idea. I think it's lovely and I really enjoy it. There was something that happened was it Utah County, Nikki, where the city got upset about it and was like, they did charge him with vandalism for sidewalk chalk. It was insane. And we looked into it and we were like, well, it's really kind of gray. So be careful with those gray areas.
Yeah, that just goes back to, knowing the risks when you go into something ahead of time. Just don't think that something might be risk-free just because you're, outside in front of your own house. Yeah, any other questions?
Yeah, I have a question. So when you are pulled over in the car and then you have passengers in the car, and if they're asked, to show their ID, are they allowed to show their ID, or they can say no to that?
So the passengers, they're theoretically pulling just you over. So the passengers sort of aren't involved. So the passengers completely have a right to remain silent. Now, if they're asking, if they ask for the passenger's ID, that's where they can say, am I suspected of committing a crime? That's when we again go back to this spreadsheet, or this not spreadsheet, this am I suspected of committing a crime? Passengers can ask, am I free to leave? And if the officer says no, then you say, I'm exercising my right to remain silent, and you just sit there quietly. But passengers, have that right to remain silent, and unless they themselves are specifically being suspected of a crime, they don't need to provide any information.
Okay, so I have one more question. My other question was, so when someone files a complaint, with ACLU, what steps do you guys take, to get those, complaints, complaints assessed? What do you guys do with that?
Yeah, so we have a whole intake department that will handle your complaint. Again, so I think one thing that people often forget is that we specifically handle civil rights violations by the government. So if you've got a dispute with your neighbor, if you have a dispute with a counter protester, we don't necessarily handle that. So if it's something that fits in our lane, we do impact litigation. So something that's going to really have an impact on, if your issue is something that's affecting a lot of people, then that's something that we're going to take up. We can always, point you to other resources if we ourselves can't litigate, but we operate through a lot of different avenues, whether it's policy advocacy, whether it's actual lawsuits and litigation, whether it's connecting you with the attorneys who are going to do the actual lawsuits and litigations. So if you contact us, you will hear back from us one way or the other. We won't just let your complaint float out there in thin air.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
We had another question. When do you need a permit in order to protest?
So this is where, you know, like if you're just going to protest on, again, that public space in a street, in a park, or not in a street, excuse me, on a sidewalk, in a park, you know, that's public property, you know, then you don't necessarily need to do that. Now, for example, like you are not, you know, it's not necessarily protected for you to be completely blocking the street. And there's a little bit of a gray area here, because if spontaneous protests actually have more sort of protections than a protest that's been planned for a long time. So for example, if you have planned, you've got a Facebook group up for a couple of months that like in 2 months, we are publicly planning that we're going to march down State Street. In that case, you probably want to get a permit because it's not that spontaneous. It's not that spontaneous protest. You are going to be marching in the street, which isn't, you know, it's not protected for you to block the street. So in that case, you're going to want to get a permit and work that out beforehand. Now it's a little bit squishy. For example, if you're at a protest and that was planned to be just in a public park, and spontaneously all the protesters go, and now let's march down the street. That spontaneous protest actually has a little bit more protections. So it's a bit of a gray area. If you've got questions like that, you can, you know, sort of more specific questions about what you're planning on doing, you can contact the ACLU, you can get in touch with me, and we can sort of, we might not be able to give you like technically legal advice, but we can sort of walk you through generally what something might look like, what some of your options might be.
Also, some of those needs for a permit they vary per municipality. So like, I don't know where y'all live, but I'm suspecting a bunch of you live in several different towns in northern Utah. So every single town that you are in, or I'm in St. George, it can be different for me as it is for Nikki, as it is for Luna. It could be different for all of us as to who's going to need a permit and for what. Now, your First Amendment right is protected and in so many ways it covers a lot of things, but each municipality has these different things. For instance, dealing with like noise ordinances. So if you get a noise machine, like a sound system, and you're making a certain amount of noise, then you're going to have a permit. So different things kind of, it varies for your city ordinances. So you may want to look into those. And if you do need help, like Nikki was saying, you're welcome to reach out to us and we're happy to kind of walk you through, because sometimes it's just daunting when you haven't done this kind of thing before, or you're saying, I'm going to switch up what I've normally done. And it's great to just get some advice. And though, like Nikki said, we cannot offer legal advice because we're not necessarily your attorneys at the time, still give us a call. We'll help you out.
Great, thanks. Another question, this might be the last one we have time for, but can you talk about no-knock warrants and if that's something that people in Utah need to be like informed about?
Sydney, do you want to go for that one?
Let's see. So we've just been kind of addressing the whole no-knock warrant, and I'm trying to remember if Nikki, I can't remember. Were we talking about eliminating those, or did we finally move forward and actually get rid of those in one of the latest legislative sessions?
Yeah, I think that's ongoing advocacy work. So that's something that, you know, that's a policy objective of the ACLU, I think, just across the country, to end no-knock warrants. Yeah, so that's another, you know, if you feel like your rights have been violated in a no-knock warrant situation, definitely please reach out to us there. So but again, that goes back to like, you want to know what's going on. So that's why you're gonna, you know, in a situation, you're gonna try to ask if a warrant is there.
And it's interesting because I know a lot of places since Breonna Taylor, they have been taking it very seriously. Some places, you know, I want to be one of those places. So I know people are taking it seriously and they're trying to get rid of the no-knock warrant. As far as if this occurs and you're in the residence that this happens at, it's going to be scary. There may be lots of noises, lights that are daunting to you in that moment, sounds, smells, there may be smoke. Like, think about this before. I think about it and I'm like, well, if a no-knock warrant happens, you don't know before it happens, and that's okay. Like, think about this stuff. What happened? What do we think about when a house is on fire, right? We think about it beforehand and we have an escape plan and we talk about it. So with the no-knock warrant, think the same thing. What would I do if someone busted into my door right now? How would I handle that? How would I handle the smells? How would I handle the sounds? What would I say? What do I need to do to stay calm? And then remember the things you can then, when they come in there, ask them for a warrant, stay calm, protect yourself and stay safe, and still insist on seeing that warrant and then staying silent. And
yeah, having that phrase practiced, I'm exercising my right to remain silent. Again, that goes back to actually practice that, know that that's what you're going to say, and tell yourself ahead of time, that you say that and then you actually stay silent.
And also be mindful of if they do exercise a warrant on your home, know where they go, know everywhere they go, know all the rooms they go into. You don't have the ability to stop them from doing these things typically, unless it specifies, the warrant says they can check like the main living areas or whatever. Remember that they stick with that, and then write down afterwards. I think we talked about this. You write down where they went, what they took, what they saw. And so with the no-knock warrant, you're going to treat it very much like a typical warrant that comes through your home. The only difference is they may have busted in your door, which is going to mean you're scared, which is going to mean it's going to be harder for you to make be mindful of the situation, what's going on. But if you practice them, then you'll be better off.
So here's that slide again, writing down everything you can remember after any sort of incident.
Thank you, Shema, and thank you, Nikki and Cindy. I just wanted to kind of go over the idea that when you hear anything legal and the legal implications of protesting or even driving a car, they almost sound like when you buy Tylenol, it gives you a list of, what all will go wrong with you. And I think we are also in that stage right now where these issues are important to our young ones. These issues have brought these people out. And I also want to kind of hear from you that it is okay to exercise your right to protest, that this is not, something that is going to land you in trouble, or that it should. And I think recent happenings in Salt Lake has created this fear around protesting, fear around free speech. I would love to hear from you some kind of positivity, some kind of, the idea that it is our right to do so.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, you're right. It 100% is your right. I think that this presentation is a lot of information to throw at folks, a lot of information that can seem really scary. Mm-hmm. If there's anything you can take away, honestly, it often boils down to remembering that you have that right to remain silent when interacting with law enforcement. Mm-hmm. So if you want to sort of think of one takeaway, I think that's the most important one. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I will say that it is really unfortunate that we've seen the actions of law enforcement sort of really try to discourage protesting almost, because it is that right. And I think that right now, we're just so inspired by the communities that have refused to, be silent, that are insisting on standing up on these issues, and especially young communities. So we want you to take this information and to feel comfortable knowing your rights. That being said, I can never say that I can't downplay the risks. There are risks. But that being said, know that, the ACLU is here, National Lawyers Guild is here, Utah Against Police Brutality are here. There are organizations out there that are supporting you. And if we come together as a community to keep standing up for our First Amendment rights, then we're all going to be better off. And that's really what we need to be doing right now. So I'm going to say, the ACLU is continuing to fight for protesters' rights, for First Amendment rights, so that you don't have to be scared of going out there, of being arrested for doing something that should be constitutionally protected. And we have, you can check out, we have sort of a statement that we put out on the viewpoint discrimination that we've seen law enforcement, you know, which protesters are they cracking down on? Who are they cracking down on? Who are they not cracking down on? Is it just the protesters who are criticizing law enforcement? Because that's not okay. No matter, you know, what you're out there saying, your right to peacefully protest is in fact protected. So if you know your rights, if you know, what the resources are, what communities, or groups and organizations are out there who have your back, you know, you're going to be a lot more empowered. And we definitely don't want to discourage people from getting out there and protesting. You know, that is sort of like one of the founding principles of our democracy, or it's supposed to be. So let's protect it together. And, you know the risks before you go, but also know your rights and know that there are a lot of people out there that have your back.
Right, as the age-old saying is, knowledge is power. Once you know what your rights are, even once you understand what is within the law and what is outside that, then one can be better prepared. I do see 2 quick questions, but before I put them on to pose it to both of you, I just wanted to everybody who's attending to know and understand that this live session will remain on our website of Utah Muslim Civic League. Any information that you want to come back and revisit, it will be available. There was a question regarding presentation being available for download. I would encourage you to actually get in touch with ACLU and ask them to run this training with your organization and with your groups. It is extremely helpful. And so the 2 questions that came in quickly, and I'm sorry to be going over time, is do we have the right to know or ask what officers may be removing or searching during a warrant, or can they hide what they've taken? And then also, who has the right not to be filmed? These 2 questions, I have another one, but I'm gonna read it without my glasses while you answer these 2.
Okay.
Is it okay if I take these, Nikki?
Yeah, go for it.
So first of all, if they're taking something from your home and not telling you about it, that's called theft. So no, that's not okay. They have to document everything that they take from their home. They may not come and like show you, hey, look, we're taking this. See ya. There may be a lot of officers there doing what they're doing, but if they are deliberately hiding what they're taking, that is called stealing. So no, that's not okay. And then, oh shoot, I lost the other question that you were saying, but
I'll just add in really quickly.
Sorry.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to add in really quickly. You do have the right to ask, if you're being arrested, you have the right to ask why you're being arrested. Now, we can't guarantee whether it's your right or not. We can't guarantee that you might get an answer, but you know, you can ask why you're being arrested, get an answer or not get an answer. But if that's something that if you're asking that why you're being arrested and they're not telling you why, at that point, you know, you're going to state your right to remain silent, but that you're going to remember that as something to write down later when you're filing complaints.
And they do have a time limit as to when they're supposed to give you that information. And it doesn't necessarily have to be immediately, which is a bummer. And then the other question was, who has the rights not to be filmed? So take, for instance, if somebody's like, maybe they're being filmed while they're having a medical emergency. So maybe like they have their own personal rights that, so you can't necessarily film me and share it out there necessarily. I mean, it's one thing if I'm in a public space and doing all that, but specifically, let's say I'm having a mental health emergency, a medical health emergency. Some of my information might be being shared, my personal private information. Like I might be saying, hi, my name is Sydney and this is my address and this is my birthday and this is my things. Even though I shouldn't say any more than Sydney and my address, but if those things are being shared, then that I do have a right to have those being kept private. And one of the reasons I wanted to jump in and say something before we dipped out of here was because the idea of the positivity and the idea of the things being scary, I really wanted to jump in on that topic, Luna, because one of the things I always end with is everything we just shared with you is really horrific, and I'm so sorry about all of it. And yes, it is absolutely scary, but we're feeding you some of the, like, if this bad thing happens, do this. If this bad thing happens, do this. There is a great chance that you're going to go out there and you're going to be just fine. And I know Nikki said, I don't want to downplay the risks, and we can't do that because especially now, the risks continue to heat up. However, when you are empowered with the information of how to protect yourself, you're gonna have a calmer mindset than the person right next to you. So you're gonna have the ability to stay safer than anybody else in that protest, because you sat through this training today and you know what your rights are and you know how to handle a scary situation. When we're scared and we don't and confused, we make bad decisions. So going in there with like Luna was saying, knowledge is power. You're by gaining this knowledge, you are having the power to determine whether or not you go home that night. So I know we say all the scary things. We don't want to say don't go out and protest. Please keep protesting. Please keep doing it, because that is how we change the world. Knowing that what the risks are, knowing what your risk level is you're willing to do, but empowered with the knowledge of how to protect yourself. Sorry.
Absolutely, and that's what it is. You know, somebody here has also put an anonymous comment saying that, you know, they've been going to protest since 2016, and most of the time they have felt safe and have also taken their teenage son. And I think that's my experience as well. I have served as ACLU observer. I have gone to protest, organized protest. I have a lot of kids who go and be part of this movement in a way, and different issues that keep coming up. But that, you know, the current or the recent development does not mean that we shy away, that we step away and let our rights go. And I just wanted to make sure that we put that message across, that this training is very important. It is something that we all should know, as we should know our rights. I've done the training with you, so I completely understand and appreciate where you guys are coming from for protecting us. But I also wanted to encourage everybody to stay active and do what feels, what feels good to their heart, and and be mindful. Once again, I thank you, Nikki and Cindy, so much for such detailed information. We're really hopeful that this will benefit a lot of people who are listening or watching on Facebook. We will keep this information right here, so that if anybody wants to come and revisit. I am going to quickly allow, if anybody has a closing comment, to do so. Otherwise, we will see you again at another training and another front very soon. All right, seems like we don't have any questions. Thank you again, and we will be in touch. Take care. Thank you, all of you.
Thank you.